Welcome to the second week of Stress Less. In every video session, we're going to start off our time with an icebreaker question. The reason we begin with these icebreaker questions are to welcome and warm up the conversation amongst the group. Under the icebreaker question, there's a section called What to Expect. After you're done answering your icebreaker question, go ahead and have someone read that section out loud. Go ahead and hit pause on your DVD, have someone read the icebreaker question out loud, and have everyone share the responses. Then, read through the What to Expect section. When you're done, you can press play, and we'll continue on with our small group session. Well, I hope you enjoyed that icebreaker. Next, we're going to get into our teaching for today, so make sure you have a pen, get ready to take some notes, and let's take a look at this.
Human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. It seems to me James is saying, before you lose control, before you lose another night of sleep, before you start raging all over other people, remember the results. Because our anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Now, let me be clear about something. Anger in and of itself is not a sin. God gets angry. In fact, there are 256 references in the Bible to God getting angry. For instance, in Psalm 103, verse 8, it says, "The Lord is merciful and gracious. He is slow to get angry, but he gets angry, and he's full of unfailing love." God has a righteous kind of anger that flows from his justice, that hates evil. We were made in the image of God, and so God has wired us all with the capacity of feeling anger. Jesus got angry. Remember in the temple when he went in and his nostrils were flaring and his temper was up over the religious leaders who were taking financial advantage of people, and he starts turning over tables and chasing out animals, and money is flying all over the place. Sometimes anger is a positive thing because it energizes us to do the right thing. There are some things that ought to make us angry. Mothers Against Drunk Driving or MAD was started by an angry mother whose child's life had been taken by an intoxicated driver. And she took that anger and she focused it in a positive direction. But James warns us that anger not focused in the right way, with the right motives, with the right controls, does not produce the righteousness that God desires. And there are many negative consequences for that. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 22 says, "An angry person stirs up conflict, and a hot-tempered person commits many sins." An angry person drives a wedge between people. A hot-tempered person gets upset so often that he or she sins in their anger. And mismanaged anger hurts families. Proverbs 11:29 says that the fool who provokes his family to anger and resentment will finally have nothing worthwhile left. How many families do you know have been destroyed by mismanaged anger? You know, all you have to do is look around at the results of mismanaged anger in our society, and you'll realize why our anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. 1,500 people a year are injured or killed on our roads because of traffic anger. It's so common, we've even developed a phrase for it. We call it road rage. Mismanaged anger plays a role in nearly every divorce. Even in marriages that stay together, there's often an emotional separation because of mismanaged anger. Parents who don't learn how to manage their anger very often wound their children, who in turn grow up, who wound their children because those patterns just continue. No wonder James says our anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. So what do? Before we throw the tantrum, before we flip a finger, before we throw a glass, before we smack somebody with a frying pan, here's our key verse this weekend. This is a verse all of us ought to memorize. It's James 1:19. "Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." Let's all say that together, okay? Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Let's say it again. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. One more time. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Okay, let's see if you can do it without looking at the words. Everyone should be... Yeah, pretty good. Way to go. Friends, those 14 words right there, they can change your life, they can change your marriage, they can change your relationships, they can change your future. James says everyone should be quick to listen. In other words, reflect before you react. One of the great remedies of anger is delay. Before you speak, before you react. Take time to reflect. Don't react impulsively. Think it through first. Look at Proverbs 29:11. Stupid people express their anger openly, but sensible people are patient and hold it back. That's saying if you're wise, if you're sensible, chill out, wait before you react. The longer you wait, your temper will improve all the more. This is why people say, hey, take a deep breath and count to 10. Because it works. You see, anger is like having a smoke detector in your house. When the smoke detector goes off, it's not telling you that something is wrong with the smoke detector. It's an indication that something else is wrong. Unless you got the beep. Yeah, you might need a battery, but if you hear, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire. You've got another indication. This is why anger is often called the second emotion. Anger exists to tell us that something else is wrong and it needs our attention. There are three primary things that lead to anger. Just as there are three primary colors, red, yellow, blue, just as there are three tools for an architect, line, angle, curve, there are three primary emotions that lead to anger, and those emotions are hurt, frustration, or fear. All anger is the result. This is the primary emotion. Anger comes along as the second emotion as a result of hurt, frustration, or fear. Let me give you a couple of scenarios and see if you can identify what's at the root of the anger. Let's say you got up for church today. You were all ready. You were ready to be here on time, but the person you were coming with was not ready to be here on time. And so you leave the house late, and you're driving to church, and you're trying to get here fast to hear a message on anger? And you might have skipped through a little red lights at the last second as you got here, and you get to church, and you're looking for a parking space, and every place as you're driving up the aisle is full, and all of a sudden you see one, you think, great, I'm going to turn in there, and just as you get ready to, a little red sports car pulls right in front of you in that place. Now, at that moment, you wrestle with what is the appropriate gesture in a church parking lot. What emotion are you feeling at that moment? Hurt, frustration, or fear? Frustration, yeah. I mean, you're just really frustrated. You're already running late. So you slam the brakes on your car, you put it in park, you get out, you go over and knock on the window of that little red sports car with a look on your face that looks like the girl from The Exorcist or something. What emotion is that person in the car feeling at that moment? Fear, yeah, right. You know, well, I'm a crazy person. Gonna hurt me. James says we can minimize so much anger if we will reflect before we react, before we speak, before we start raging. Reflect and be quick to listen. Has anyone ever left a relationship because they were genuinely listened to? Stop listening to me so much. No, of course not. We leave and we get angry when we're cut off, when we're misunderstood, when we're manipulated. What would happen if we were quick to listen? If we sought to understand a situation, what's underneath? What's going on here? Is there some hurt here? Is there some frustration? Is there fear? If we would seek to understand before we seek to be understood, if we would reflect before we react, so many good things could happen. So be quick to listen. And then James says, everyone should be slow to speak. What's he saying? Before you let it blow, before the volcano fires off, you need to restrain your remarks. Restrain your remarks. Why is it so important to restrain your remarks, to be slow to speak rather than to just let it fly? I mean, don't we feel so much better when we just let it fly, when we just let it ventilate? Now, psychologists have not been particularly helpful to us in this area because about 35 years ago, a theory began to be popularized that when you get angry, you just need to get it off your chest. You need to blow some steam. You need to throw something, hit something, scream at something, because if you don't, eventually you're just going to explode like a volcano one day. And that sounds good, but what the research is pretty conclusively saying these days is it's just the opposite. Because ventilation is actually fun. It makes people feel so good when they ventilate. It makes them feel so powerful that it just reinforces the behavior. And to show you what I mean, I want to say the word yes in a moment, and then I want you to say back to me just as angrily and as, forcefully as you can. I want you to say no. I'm going to say yes, you say no. This is a chance for you to get in touch with your river of rage. If you want to shake your fist at your pastor, here's your opportunity right here, right now. You ready? So yes. No. Yes. No. I said yes. No. Now stop. No. I said yes. No. Friends, it's scary from where I'm standing right now. I'm just telling you that. And you see, the problem with ventilating is that feels good, doesn't it? It's kind of fun. And so you're just more likely to do it again the next time. Now, another discovery that researchers have made on this, about this ventilation therapy stuff, and this is going to surprise some of you, but most people do not like being ventilated on. In other words, the ventilator has a lot more fun than the ventilatee. And it's not very effective. Let's say a guy gets cut off in traffic, and then he's really mad, and he pulls up next to the driver at the next stoplight, and he starts to ventilate, and he says, "What kind of idiot are you? What were you thinking? Are you trying to kill me? I ought to run you over." When was the last time you saw the person getting ventilated on respond, "That's a good point. You've really touched me deeply here, and I'm going to change. And I'm going to become a more courteous driver. I want to thank you for offering all those pointers to me." And that hand gesture was really meaningful to me also. Friends, the research has become clear on this. Letting it fly, ventilating, is not an effective way to manage anger because it creates more anger. The truth is, we manage anger better when we are slow to speak and we don't recklessly ventilate. Now, let me also add something on this. We need to be slow to speak to other people about what we are angry about, because that also increases our anger. Most of the time, many of us think, I'm angry at so-and-so, so I think I'll just go talk to someone else about it. I think I'll just talk to a third party about it, and that will help my anger dissipate. So instead of taking our anger directly to the person that we're angry with to work it out, we go to somebody else that we know will be sympathetic toward us, and we dump our frustrations on them, and we tell them how badly we've been mistreated so that we can get it off our chest. And it feels good to do this, but it doesn't decrease our anger. You see, talking to a third party usually increases your anger because the more you talk about what an unfair, abusive, unjust, thoughtless person that human piece of excrement is, the angrier you get at them. Jesus had a far different plan for dealing with anger toward another person. He basically taught that when it's done right, you go to the person that you are angry with, and that's the best way to deal with it. Notice he says in Matthew 18, verse 15, "If your brother sins against you, go and show him his fault." Now notice this phrase, "just between the two of you." What would happen if every time we got angry at somebody, instead of going to a third party and all that kind of stuff, we go directly to them and we could say, "I haven't talked to another person about this, but we've got a problem here. And I just thought maybe we could talk about it together and get on the solution side together. Friends, when you needlessly involve other people in a conflict, often the anger escalates, and now you got people choosing up sides, and they're dragged into it. Jesus says, if at all possible, go to the person directly that you have unresolved anger with. The healthiest thing some of you could do is to do the very difficult thing of going to the person that you're angry with, stop making excuses, be slow to speak, restrain your remarks, talk to them thoughtfully, wisely, and carefully. James says everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak. And then finally he says everyone should be slow to become angry. How do we do that? We're able to be slow to become angry when we reinterpret our rage. When we reinterpret our rage. The late Stephen Covey wrote one time about being in New York City, and he got on a subway one morning. There were a number of people on the subway, people reading newspapers, listening to music, everybody sitting kind of quietly, and then they stopped at one subway stop, and this father and his young children got on, and they were rambunctious, and the kids were loud, and they were rude, and everybody else was just kind of quiet on the subway. And Covey says this father sat down next to him, and he just kind of closed his eyes and seemed to be completely oblivious to the fact that his kids are just causing havoc on the subway. And he thought, surely he's going to say something. Surely he's going to rein him in a little bit here. But he didn't do anything. So finally, Covey, just as politely as he could, said, sir, he goes, I don't know if you've noticed, but your kids are really being disruptive here on the subway. I wonder if you could do anything about that. And all of a sudden, the father said, oh, you're probably right. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. He said, we just came from the hospital. Their mother died about an hour ago. And I don't know what to do. And I don't know what to think, and I guess they don't know how to handle it either. Covey said in that moment, he suddenly saw things differently. He thought differently. He felt differently about that man and about his children. In that moment, he reinterpreted the rage. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 29 says, whoever is patient, notice, has great understanding. But the one who is quick-tempered displays folly. You'll demonstrate great understanding if you're patient with people. So you reinterpret the rage. Those difficult people in your life, they weren't just born that way. Somewhere along the line, they've experienced hurt, frustration, fear, and usually very deeply. Some of you had very difficult parents devoid of emotion, maybe extremely stern parents that frustrated you. I'll bet if you went back and you did a little understanding of what their parents were like, what their brothers and sisters were like, you would gain a deeper understanding of why your parents were that way. And it would help you reinterpret some of your rage. Maybe that boss that you work with that's so difficult and so demanding and so, a storm whenever they walk into a room. Maybe they grew up in a home where they felt like they would never measure up and they would never, could never perform enough. And so they have this need to succeed. And it doesn't change anything. I mean, it doesn't justify their behavior, but it helps you, excuse me, it helps you understand him or her better in that moment. Love is patient. And patient people have great understanding. It's amazing when you take the time to understand a person that you begin to be more patient with that person. All of a sudden, the Holy Spirit starts changing your perspective on these people and giving you a sense of compassion and patience and tolerance. And instead of losing your cool, you start thinking, how can I help them? How can I serve them? Because love is patient. Now, I want to pull all this together for you by closing with a personal story from my own life as an example of how this can really work in your life. I've got a nephew that lives in Nashville, and he used to do some work for Amy Grant. This was back when Amy Grant's career was red hot, and she was at the top of the charts. And she was coming to Las Vegas to perform at the Las Vegas Hilton. And I lived in Las Vegas at the time. I was a pastor in Las Vegas at the time. And so Amy's manager, who was a good friend of my nephew, called me and just said, hey, just wanted to check in while we're in town. He goes, would you like to come to Amy's show? I was like, are you kidding me? I would love to do that. He goes, well, I'd love to get you some tickets. He said, how many do you need? And I'm thinking, oh boy, I'm going to make my wife really happy. I'm going to make some friends really happy. I said, how about 4? He said, great. He said, you just come. I'll have them waiting for you at the ticket window on Saturday night. So Saturday night, I hit my wife, Barbara. We meet our friends at the Las Vegas Hilton. I show up at the ticket window, I'm thinking, oh man, I'm really made the big score here. And I walk up, and I said, Gene Apple, here for my 4 tickets. And the gal at the ticket booth says, Gene who? And I said, Gene Apple. And she says, I'm sorry, Mr. Apple, we don't have any tickets for you here. And I said, oh, I bet, no, my last name is spelled Appel. It's a common mistake. It's happened all my life. She goes, no, I'm sorry, I don't see any here. No, I look at my wife and friends who are standing about 30 feet away over here, waiting for me to make the big score, and I thought, I think I'm a little frustrated right now. And my fuse has been lit. I mean, where were the tickets this guy was supposed to provide for me? And I started thinking about all the ways I could make this woman behind the desk feel really bad about my situation and take out my frustration. But I stopped myself and I thought, now, Gene, remember the results here. Remember the results. Should have a graph. There we go. You're a pastor. Your wife and good friends are standing over there right now. If you spew all over this gal, it is not going to produce the righteousness that God desires for your life, okay? So I said to the woman behind the counter, as politely as I could, I said, well, do you have any suggestions on what I should do? And it felt like she sent me on a wild goose chase. She said, Mr. Apple, why don't you go check the will call window? Maybe your tickets are there. I said, okay. So I go to the will call window. Did they have any tickets in my name? No. I looked at my wife and friends across the room. I don't want them to know anything's wrong. Just a minute. And I'm really frustrated, and I'm ready to go stomping back at the woman at the ticket booth, ready to let her hear my level of frustration and Dolby surround sound. But I catch myself, and I said, now, Gene, reflect before you react. This isn't her fault. She didn't intentionally send you on this wild goose chase. Go back and be quick to listen. And so with great restraint, I went back and I decided I would restrain my remarks. And I said, the people at Will Call, they sent me right back over here and they said the tickets would be here, trying to force a smile. And she said, well, I'm sorry. She said, I don't know what to tell you. My only suggestion for you would be to go over to a house phone and call backstage and see if you can try to locate this manager who was supposed to leave you the tickets. I thought, supposed to leave me the tickets? Is she questioning my truthfulness here? Is she questioning my integrity? I thought to myself, now I've got a choice here. I can commit a lot of sin in the next few moments. I can damage this woman. I can damage my example in public. I can damage my example to my wife and to my friends over there. Or I could reinterpret this rage. And friends, remember, you do have a choice. You don't have to spew. You don't have to litigate it. You don't have to throw a bomb. Anger can be handled in a God-honoring way. So I started praying, oh God, give me strength by your Holy Spirit to be self-controlled right now, because I know this woman matters to you and Jesus died for her and she deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. So God, help me exercise supernatural levels of patience and self-control. Well, I go to the house phone and I call backstage. And a woman answers the phone, very pleasant voice sounding. And I said, I'm looking for so-and-so. I don't know. He's Amy Grant's manager, and he was going to leave tickets for me, and there's nothing here at the ticket booth. Do you think you could help find him? Well, I didn't know when I asked to be put backstage that they connected me with Amy Grant's dressing room. And the pleasant female on the other end of the phone goes, Gene, I am so sorry. She goes, this is Amy. Huh? I am talking to Amy freaking Grant on the phone. She said, you go back to the ticket booth and I'll have 4 tickets waiting for you. So I hung up the house phone. I walked about 30 feet to the ticket booth. I wave at my wife and my friends over there. I walk up to the lady at the desk and she's smiling and she says, Gene, I have your tickets right here. 5th row, center stage. And I took them and I was so happy. And she says to me, she goes, oh, by the way, I love coming to your church. In that moment, I was so glad I remembered the results and reflected before I reacted and restrained my marks and reinterpreted the rage. And she says to me, she goes, yeah, there's a bunch of us that work here. And there were about 5 other people in the ticket booth. They go, oh yeah, Gene, we all come to your church too. We love it. It's so good to see you down here tonight. What a great reminder that our anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires.
What a great message. After each video teaching, we'll be going through the discussion questions in your guide based on the video message we just watched. This is really going to be the meat of our small group because this is where we'll be able to share our takeaways, learn from each other, and encourage each other. Well, at this time, you can turn off your DVD and begin answering your discussion questions. We'll see you next week for session 3 of our Stress Less small group study.